Hi, welcome back. Again, I'm Tom Field with Information Security Media Group. The topic of this session is the future of identity and access management, use case driven authentication for 2021 and beyond. Let me tell you a little bit about this. How can businesses keep their users top of mind as they introduce new IAM solutions? And how can they ensure their data is not put at risk in the cloud? In this session, you're going to be gifted by the presence of Bassam Al-Kawadi, co-CEO at Axiad. He's going to help you find out how you can secure your enterprise by leveraging state-of-the-art multi-factor authentication security. With that, let me turn you over now to Bassam. Bassam, stage is yours.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. As Tom mentioned, just wanted to walk you through today's agenda on the topic that we want to discuss with regards to the future of IAM. The landscape of cybersecurity has changed dramatically over the last year, specifically with what is our new perimeter when we talk about cybersecurity. We'll look at why multiple credentials are a reality. That has been the case. And even with the introduction of new IAM vendors or players, that still continues to be the case. And we'll kind of review that in a little bit more detail. Why virtual private cloud is essential for IAM. And again, we'll talk about how do you secure your keys to the kingdom? What new threats are you inheriting by going to the cloud, and how can you actually minimize or eliminate some of these new potential threats? We hear a lot of the term passwordless out there today. We kind of wanted to walk you through what our thought process is of taking a holistic approach to passwordless and how to empower users to really expand and speed up the adoption rate, which is critical for the success of your project. And then we'll kind of look at some next steps. So as I mentioned, first thing we wanted to look at is how has the landscape in cybersecurity changed? So just some really quick metrics baseline for us to kind of to look at. About 2 or 3 companies completely moved their majority of their workforce last year due to the pandemic, and now we're rolling into 2021, and that's still the case so far. About 1 in 4 companies are adopting a permanent work from home / work from anywhere policy. Even surveying a lot of employees, about 70% of them would like to return to office, but only in a part-time capacity. So what does that mean? That means the landscape or the remote access worker or the remote authentication now not only has expanded tremendously, but now is a permanent state. And we'll look at what threats would that bring up, and how would that change things or affect the organization from an IAM perspective. Looking at a few little bit additional data points when we start to looking at what new threats are we seeing due to this perimeter completely disappearing or shifting? So the main one is now individuals, as they're working from everywhere, we've seen phishing attacks have skyrocketed. Phishing attacks were already a tremendous problem, but now as we see in 2020, about a 350% increase. That is a daunting task for IT to tackle and manage and go after and try to educate end users on how to identify phishing attacks, and as they're getting more sophisticated every single day. Then we want to look at data breaches. Typically, data breaches, sometimes there's a misconception there that hackers are continuously trying to brute force their way into an organization. That is the case sometimes, but the majority of the cases, what hackers are looking for is an easy way in. And the easier way in, rather than if they're trying to brute force attack, there's organizations have deployed a lot of sophisticated tools to detect those anomalies. So what they'd rather do is kind of try to figure out a way to get a hold of a user's credentials, kind of misused or lost users, through something like phishing attacks or through something like password reuse, where users might use their corporate password for an internal purpose and then might use that corporate password for an external or a personal application that's not as secure, and hackers can find their way there. That is a topic on its own on password and password reuse and password security. Last but not least, now we know that what companies were looking for before, which is perimeter, that I have my users either come into the office and work, and then when they're remote, they're working off a VPN. That landscape has changed tremendously now. Now with users wanting to work from anywhere, BYOD devices, they want to use their own device, whether it's their own tablet, their own mobile, or logging in from a portal from anywhere at any time. So that has completely changed the grounds of what really security protocols we need to enable or push out. We talked about part of the agenda that why do we still have multiple credentials, and why is this still a reality in a today where we have IAM solutions that claim that, hey, part of my solution, I provide you with an authenticator, and that should be the authenticator of all things. But unfortunately, that's not the case today. And the reason being is when we look at an organization, you have different levels of access for individuals. So you have privileged users like your admins, like your domain administrators, individuals that have like keys to the kingdom kind of thing. You have non-privileged users, which again, in that category, depending on what sensitive data they're accessing, that could change what type of authenticator they need to use. So we have within the user community, within our organization, you have privileged and non-privileged users. Then we go into the next element that not only do we need to find a way to authenticate or multi-factor authenticate users, but we also need to authenticate devices. That is important because we need to know that this device is authorized to access the network, or this device is authorized to be part of our part of the entitlement to access resources. We look at VPNs and corporate networks, or the internal networks, how those are secure, what elements are needed to authenticate to them. And then we have the new paradigm or the new reality of as companies are moving their resources to cloud, now you have different applications that are hosted in the cloud, and these sometimes have their own type of authenticators that you have to use. At some point in time, we hope that we can come back to our physical buildings, and when you do so, you have your traditional physical access card that you're tapping at the door that will grant you entry into the door. Last but not least, then you have legacy applications or even current applications that have their own authentication scheme or own authentication methods, and that don't simply integrate with IAM vendors or IAM authenticators, like for example, piggybacking off a SAML token. They have their own authentication scheme, they get their own authentication credentials, and especially the legacy application or Win32 applications or terminal for some banks and healthcare, those can't be easily integrated into some of the leading IAM vendors. So if you look at the graph here, we try to kind of really show a picture of that daunting task for the IT team. But beyond just how daunting it is for the IT team, it is also daunting for the end user. So from an IT team perspective, now they're asked to do more with less. Now they have the same team, but the threats have gone up, and therefore now they're trying to manage different applications, different authentication schemes. They're trying to manage their cloud applications. They're trying to manage the on-prem applications. They're deploying different authentication types for different individuals, managed by different backends. And you can see for the IT team how that could get pretty complex for them from a management perspective and a time management perspective. Also from a security, not just a time management, the onboarding and offboarding has become extremely difficult during the times that we live in today. Some remote, now when you have new hires that never even come to that office, even on day one, traditionally IT systems as part of the onboarding process, you would go to physically to an IT team, get your hardware, they would get you your initial credentials, and from there they can actually give you, get you onboarded. And same thing during an offboarding process, you would come in, hand over your the hardware that you have or the authentication token that you have, and you can be offboarded. Now all this is done remote. Individuals, when new hires, they get shipped a package that could contain their laptop, their new mobile device, and now everything as it's done remote. So validating that user's identity from day zero becomes all more important, and also being able to offboard them on all and every company resource during an offboarding process is also as critical as ever. If we look at it from an end user perspective, we've complicated the user life tremendously. And this is where the concept always of security versus usability, right? Typically, when we look at increasing security, we're making the life of the user more complex. That is kind of the traditional approach. And that happens not because, or companies that are trying to do security or eliminate threats. It's not that they're trying to make the life of the user harder. It's just because today that's the nature of the deployment. For example, you log in with credential A to your laptop or to your corporate resource. You log in with credential B to your cloud application. You log in with another credential to your on-prem to an on-prem legacy application, and so on, so on, so on. And all these have different authenticators or different password rules, and they change at different times. They expire at different times. It makes it a nightmare for the end user to keep track of all this. And then what end users start to do is, because they don't want their credential to be locked or expired, they start to cut corners. They start to write passwords down. They start to copy them in notepads and in their calendar and in different areas to ensure that they don't get locked out or things like that. And that's when you start to increase the risk profile for the organization because it's becoming too complex for the end user. So that's kind of from a high level what we see so what we've seen from an organization, from an IT perspective, and from the end user. And so there was a big shift to move to cloud and to move to cloud technologies, which we think is great. Us, Axiad, we are a cloud vendor. And when we looked at cloud and how would organizations move their keys to the kingdom? When we're talking about authentication, that's literally your keys to the kingdom, right? If your authentication platform is compromised, then pretty much the hacker has free reign. They have they've owned your IT network if that happens. So moving to a mutualized platform might be great for applications like Salesforce and stuff like that. That is fantastic. But when we talk about your security and your keys to the kingdom, is that the right approach? What do I mean by that? If we take kind of a high level view of I am moving to the cloud and I'm moving my keys to the kingdom and my security to the cloud. If I have two options, option one is my security stored in an apartment in a high rise where hundreds of thousands of apartments are there. The risk that you have is not only are you worried about somebody breaking in through the apartment security downstairs and then breaking into your apartment, but now you have additional threats as you have to look at all your neighbors that have adjacent walls around you that a hacker might hack them and then through them try to break through that specific wall that's adjacent to yours, and therefore they can gain access. That becomes more prevalent, for example, if you're a large organization, you spend a lot of money on security, and then your neighbor, on the other hand, is a much smaller organization. Their funds are a lot more limited, and therefore they're spending less on IT security. As a hacker, that is something that they look for. How can I breach that cloud? And then from there, how can I go from cloud to cloud? And how can I go from one tenant to another tenant? If we look at one of the recent attacks that happened with SolarWind, that is a potential threat right there, because the traffic is not locked down only for your organization. Hackers can reach it from other locations. Based on that, our preference has always been, when it comes to security and cloud security, virtual private clouds is definitely the way to go. You eliminate a lot of the additional threats, and kind of can have your cake and two. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can move to a cloud and keep it as secure as possible, almost like an extension to your own data center. We talked a lot about kind of the IT infrastructure and what organizations can do, but from a back end and product perspective. But now we wanted to also talk about, well, how can we move to a virtual private cloud? We've locked our data that's kind of locked to us. But how do we have that holistic approach? How can we find a way to manage all the different threat elements or the threat vectors? And how can we make it simple, not just for the IT team, but also for end users? So first thing we need to look at, if we're going to adopt an authentication scheme, we need to make sure that we include all users in it. So that's privileged and non-privileged. Yes, the authenticator might be different or the level of access might be different, but we need to find ways to secure all users. And when we're securing all users, then we have to look at the next item, which is securing all devices. And that devices that could be at the end user hand, whether it's the machine identity or your mobile device. It could be all the different web applications within the organization. It could be all the different device networks, your IP cameras, your switches, your networks, anything that you have within your perimeter. How can we ensure that any connected device as part of enterprise IoT, how can we make sure any device that connects to the network is an authorized device and there is a secure mechanism for that device to ask for entitlement to get onto the network, to make sure that we don't have rogue devices trying to get onto the corporate network. Having a platform that is future-proof. What do I mean by that? Some of the IAM vendors or some applications out there have adopted a single or a dual scheme method of authentication, which could be good to address the problem that you might have today, a point problem. But part of a holistic approach, and as we had demonstrated in a couple of slides above, is that is kind of a targeted approach. It's not a platform approach, and it's not a holistic approach to solving all the problems. So having a vendor that can, having a platform that can address your users, your devices, your network, your legacy applications, all these, how to help on with zero-day vulnerabilities, how to have on onboarding, offboarding, having a platform like that that's future-proof. You might only start with one portion of it, but knowing the fact that you can grow within that platform to address the other areas that we're talking about is really critical and key for the long-term success and the long-term ROI of the project that you're trying to do. So what does it look from an end user perspective? How can we simplify that path? We talked about typically the intersect between security and simplicity is typically on the scale it's pretty high. As more complex it gets, as more security elements we want to deploy, it theoretically should get more complex with the end user. That's not the case. What we're trying to do here is provide the maximum amount of security that's possible for the end user and for the IT team with the least amount of friction and with the most amount of simplicity for the end user. So where that comes in is it comes into the flexibility of that solution. How flexible is that solution to grow within the environment as we had described, but more importantly, kind of a user and end user centric approach. If we empower our end users to do everything themselves, then, but they can do it themselves, but they can do it also securely, not only do we get a great adoption rate, we solve a lot of the pitfalls of IAM and off multi-factor authentication by having users have issues with lockout or token expiry and different use cases like that. So simplicity, flexibility, empower end user or user centric, and last but not least, ensuring that all this data and all these credentials are locked in that virtual private cloud. If we kind of dive a little bit deeper into, well, how would that look from an end user perspective? And what is my path to passwordless? So as we had mentioned, one key element is really we need to find security for all users. It doesn't make sense to have a vault door in your front door and lock down the majority of your windows, but then have your sliding door in the back unlocked, or it has a really simple locking mechanism that anybody just can open it up very easily without a lot of effort. We need to apply and having a vault door at every single entry point is extremely expensive and not efficient at all. It's really knowing where the protected data needs to be, applying the right set of credentials and the right level of security around those data elements, but not forgetting and keeping in mind that we need to secure every element or each user or any user that's trying to authenticate within our platform. And what I mean by user here, it's not just our employees, it's employees, contractors, third party. Anytime they're interacting with our network or with our resources, we need to ensure that there's a way that we can have them authenticate, but we need to keep that authentication at the appropriate level and make it as simple as possible. And that's why keeping the user in mind when we talk about managing their life cycle is extremely important. If we do that, if we give them all the tools and empower the end user to do everything themselves, what we've noticed is we can accelerate that passwordless journey. It becomes a seamless transition. So just to walk you through a simple use case, how would that look? What does that mean? If we can, let's say the user, when they get their laptop, it's their first day on the job, IT shipped it to them, they get their laptop, they get their initial credential to authenticate to the laptop, and as soon as they authenticate, the platform is smart enough to realize this is an employee logging in for the first time. And as soon as they log in, it says, hey, you just logged in for the first time. Yes, you logged in with a weak credential, a temporary access code or a temporary password or some sort of activation code. Right away, redirecting the user to a lock session where it only allows them to enable their MFA. And then after that, the system is smart enough, it realizes that the user's MFA hasn't been enabled and now will only allow them to authenticate using that MFA. And then also that system being smart enough to detect if there's an issue with their MFA or there's an issue with their credential, for it to automatically and smartly be able to detect what's wrong with it, how to fix it, create a wizard and walk the user how to fix it securely, so that there's no interruption to their day. They don't even need to call help desk. They can do it themselves at their workstation because the whole chain has been secured. We know the laptop that they're using is an authorized device from its certificate that's on it. We know the user is an authorized user from their authenticator. We have the system that has enough AI on it and intelligence to detect that the user is who they are and they're authenticating without any anomalies. And then we can help the user automatically through that journey to ensure not only can they deploy their strong credential, but also that they're capable of managing it themselves without sacrificing any security in this area. So finding that platform or finding that trusted partner that won't sacrifice security for usability. Unfortunately, we see that more and more today in our world with authentication services. Security sometimes is sacrificed for the endeavor of simplicity. What we would recommend is always look for a partner that has both in mind and would not sacrifice either of them. I hope you, with our limited time, I hope we were able to kind of shed some light on our view of where IAM today and where IAM is heading. If you would like to visit us at our website and get more information at axiad.com, we would love to even walk you through our platform. If you would like to request a demo through axiad.com/try-Axiad. And of course, after the event, please feel free to come visit us at our booth. We're very excited to be part of this summit, and we thank Tom and his team for inviting us here today.
Very good, Bassam. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and insight. And of course, we're grateful for your sponsorship as well. Terrific overview. And I know we got some good questions. And as you say, if people have additional questions, they can follow you back to the virtual booth and ask them. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Look forward to meeting people at the booth, and we're happy to answer any questions. And again, look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And of course, I want to thank our attendees. We appreciate that you took time to attend this session. I ask, please give us feedback on this session, on the others you cover throughout the day. We're always interested in the speakers that resonate the most, the topics, what you'd like to see at future events as well. Enjoy the rest of the summit. again, for Information Security Media Group. I'm Tom Field. Thanks so much for attending.